You saw that play out in China. Like, people really do enact these policies, and it ends up being, from where I'm sitting, absolutely.
Do you mean like the one-child policy or something?
No, I'm talking like Mao's China. Mao's China was the state is going to take care of you. All that matters is the state. You're not there for mom and dad. You are there for the state. And if you got to turn on mom and dad so we can beat them to death, then you better do it. And they would literally beat them to death.
I don't think the Cultural Revolution was good per se, but I also don't think that it was
good per se, but I don't think it was as bad as the evil West makes it out to be.
Oh no, I never said that any of these countries, I guess China with the exception of China, are like even abiding by the principles of socialism or communism. That's not my...
I don't know how China abides by the principles of socialism or communism. I'm not sure what he means exactly there. Hasan finally took my advice. Good job. It's taken him a while, but...
Today's guest, Hasan Piker, is one of the biggest voices on the American left. He believes capitalism has failed young people, that greedy corporations and corrupt politicians are strangling their opportunities, and that government intervention is the only way to fix it. I see the root cause, and thus the solution set, very differently. And that's exactly why I wanted this. Different reasons.
I think it's partially because money is fake, and we've just decided like, oh, it doesn't matter if Donald Trump decides to slap 150% tariffs on like all incoming goods. You'll have a week of instability, and then ultimately he'll turn around and say, actually, the tariffs are gone, and then the market will rally again, and will inevitably recover back to the point that it was at, and then he will turn around and say tariffs again. And after the 10th time he's done this, after months and months and months, you start noticing that these companies are like, okay, maybe it's not that significant. Maybe it's not that impactful. Maybe we can actually eat some of these costs, and that's the reason.
Stock market and like inflation and stuff are going to be I can't even think of an analogy. Like these things like kind of will sort of track each other a little bit, but it's going to be lagging, or it's going to be, what would you say, like lagging versus predictive? It's going to depend on a lot of different factors here. I would be very careful. Why am I saying this? Like this guy's any idea what the fuck he's talking about. Sorry. If you're speaking to somebody knowledgeable, you'd be very careful in tying together like cost to the consumer of like goods and services to like stock prices, especially when things like tariffs happen, because there's a whole bunch of different things that companies and countries and consumers and individual firms can do to like mess around with prices when it comes to things like tariffs. Like for instance, we saw people stockpile a whole bunch of shit. You might have a weakening or a strengthening of a currency relative to another country. Consumers might shift around their consumption, and that would put different pressures on different markets. Like
why you haven't seen the hyperinflation that was slated to come if companies were supposed to respond in the way that the market is normally supposed to respond to immediate tariffs like this, like broad universal tariffs like this. So and as far as like innovation goes, as far as Elon goes, I'm not a fan of Elon. He's not a fan of mine. he's cursed me out on his platform in the past. But I will say, you brought up innovation in the first.
God, he's so Arab.
For 66 years, going from the Wright brothers all the way to landing on the moon, right? And you said before Elon, we had no innovation in the space traveling sector. And there's some truth to that, but I think that's...
Hasan is doing the meme and saying tariffs don't matter. No, this is not what Hasan is doing. When Hasan says that tariffs don't matter, this is coming from the more like a socialist ideology. And he's saying that prices at the end of the day are arbitrarily set by corporations to maximize profits for firms and ultimately for the owner class. Hasan is saying that the prices don't matter that much because they just set them at whatever the fuck they want to exploit their workers and to exploit customers. That's why he says that.
And that is an inefficiency of the government, because the first 66 years, big leaps were made by the government, by publicly funded research, by NASA. And it was always in a state of disrepair because it turned into political football. The only reason why we even went to the moon was because we wanted to flex on the USSR, who had actually beaten us to space, right? And therefore there was funding in the program. But as the Cold War took a turn and we decided that this was no longer as important, NASA funding was always on the docket to be cut, right? Instead of something that we focused on for the sake of advancing mankind. And my point always has been we shouldn't rely on we shouldn't wait for private industry to make up for these issues. We should have, especially fields that require innovation and requires failure, requires big technological leaps, like figuring out the internet, like inventing the internet or inventing space travel, things of that nature. Like that should be still heavily funded by the government.
Wait, am I retarded? Why wouldn't a company set the price of their product to maximize their profits? When I say that, I'm sorry, let me explain more. When he says that prices are set to maximize their profits, he's saying that like market forces and all of that aren't real, and that every firm is colluding with everybody else to scam all their customers, and they could arbitrarily set like prices to be whatever they wanted to be. Is what. Yeah. This is unfortunate. This is even like a Kamala Harris talking point where she's saying all the price increases from corporations have just been them price gouging. And I'm like anti-price gouging laws, and it's like I don't think that works this way.
The government heavily subsidized by the government and even controlled by the government. I have no issue with this. A lot of people, especially in America, get worried when they hear me say this kind of stuff. Same with housing. You can do major public housing initiatives and just completely explode the housing market in its entirety. And by that I mean explode the housing market as in like build free or incredibly affordable price-adjusted housing that the government owns. Many countries and many cities that have actually damn near eradicated the issue of homelessness have done so through public ownership over the land. This is a scary concept for a lot of Americans.
Who has eradicated homelessness? Which country is he talking about? He said many of them have. Which countries and cities have eradicated homelessness? Actually, not cities are boring because you can just move people to another city.
But where are you talking about?
Singapore is a great
Okay.
example as a country.
Okay. Singapore homeless rates. Jesus. 1,036 people. I feel like I need to learn more about Singapore because people bring this argument up sometimes for good or bad things, but I don't know enough about it. Like I know that Econoboy and somebody else were arguing over the extent of like how socialized their economy was or whatever. Wait, what is the population of Singapore? Hold on. Singapore is literally the edgiest of edge cases. Yeah, everything about the way the country ran looked like pretty unique. That is basically eliminating homelessness though. Damn, that kind of sucks. When you get down to a low enough homeless number, I wonder how shitty the homeless people feel. You imagine your country like 220 homeless people and like you and a friend are homeless. You're like half a percentage point of the entire homeless population. It's a city-state. It's hard to map that onto a place that is 100% urban. Yeah, maybe, yeah. I wonder if there are any countries, larger examples of this.
China is another great example.
Singapore
obviously.
specifically privatized.
No, but Singapore still has like a government land lease program.
Yeah, but if you really research Lee Kuan Yew, he was, I use this word playfully, not literally, but he was a gangster. Like he said literally, I made sure the communists know I will fight you to the death. He went in and told unions, fucking knock it off, get to work.
I mean, but in terms of housing, in terms of like the way that
his whole thing was, I wanted private ownership. People had to know.
Regardless of whether Tom reads like a book or has a conspiracy thing or whatever, like he'll have some reason for believing this. I think Hasan is just repeating talking points though. I would be surprised if Hasan can meaningfully engage or even knows the person that Tom just brought up.
Fucking knock it off, get to work.
I mean, but in terms of housing, in terms of like the way that
his whole thing was, I wanted private ownership. People had to know that they were in on the economy because the only way to build an economy on capitalistic principles is to make sure that everybody's in on it.
Yeah.
Like Singapore is an incredible
Hasan has no idea.
model for people that want a way out, but they often look at that and don't realize that this guy was like Captain Capitalism.
I'm not saying this guy was I never said that any of these countries, I guess China with the exception of China, are like even abiding by the principles of socialism or communism. That's not my
I don't know how China abides by the principles of socialism or communism. I'm not sure what he means exactly there, but I'm sure he'll get into it.
advocacy at all. The other example I was going to use is Austria, which again was led by obviously Red Vienna was led by people who are from that background, Marxist, socialist, communist, and
Red Vienna. Is it still that today?
whatever. But like Austria as a country is not a communist country and it's not a socialist country, and yet Vienna has I think 65% public housing, and these are fantastic houses. Like
That's a city. I mean,
it's just owned by the government, and they have these lease programs. Every country has a different way of doing it, but I think ultimately government intervention of that sort is not something that I disagree with. I don't really care. They don't have to be like communists or socialists or whatever. I want to fix the problem. And I think one of the best ways to do that, or at least one of the most efficient ways that people have done that, is through this kind of intervention or direct control to a certain degree.
This kind of intervention is government owned?
Government-owned intervention, like the land ownership concept goes back to the hands of the government, and you can get like in China, you can get a 100-year lease, right? And the government will always restore your lease. There's no problem there. But for this very reason, there is a lot more control over focusing on building inventory for future demand rather than holding inventory in the hands of people that want to keep that inventory limited so that their prices are constantly going up. So like you said, the only way that their net worth goes up is if this finite supply housing, if you're lucky enough to be able to purchase it or lucky enough to get a mortgage to purchase it, the finite supply of housing stays limited so that it's constantly going up, and therefore your leverage is more valuable, your nest egg is more valuable, and you understandably have this like perverse interest in maintaining the housing supply as low as possible. And the inverse of that, if you were to blow up the already limited housing supply and you were to actually explode and build so much housing, specifically through government dual structure that exists for housing, so they make it into a speculative asset that is like impossible for its price to go down, pretty much, unless there are major market incidents like the 2008 housing market bubble.
Yes, but we have to like figure out why is it that it's so hard for these to go down in value. And the reason it's so hard for them to go down in value is the amount of money that's being printed causes assets to go up. And then,
oh boy, back on that Federal Reserve grind.
Your point earlier, if you have NIMBYism and people are not in my backyard, you're not going to build high density housing. And so
I love high density housing.
Of course. And so it's like, this is how you're going to have to drive down the cost of housing and make it affordable.
He says as he lives in a mansion in a single family home, residentially zoned area.
That's just a reality. So it's what I'm saying is people need to understand why that's happening. It is not happening because capitalism bad. It is happening because money printing bad. Now, money printing trade-off is probably the right way to say it. Money printing comes with advantages and it comes with wild disadvantages. And people are not mapping cause and effect well. And so we're getting into a situation where they don't realize that money printing is the problem. So going to the Democratic Socialist of America, is that what DSA stands for?
That's what DSA stands for.
Going to the DSA, it's like all of the things that they want are going to exacerbate those problems. And so this is where I'm like, hey, even if we can agree, I don't know that I agree with the DSA and where they're trying to end up. So it's probably worth me saying where I want to end up. And if you see yourself as a member of that or not, if you can help us understand what people that want that organization to thrive, what they're aimed at, that would be very useful. What I'm aimed at is people can save money and it's not stolen away from them through the hidden tax of inflation, that people can afford a home because it is an asset that they understand intuitively, that people can make a living wage through market dynamics, and that basically you're not stuck in your class. So there's high social mobility. Your future isn't determined by your zip code. I round that to human flourishing, but those are like the specific things that I'm pointed at. Now, when I look at the DSA, they seem literally at wild odds with that, wanting to abolish the family, capture the means of production. Like, it gets pretty wild. Now,
no, the first thing is funny. That's not abolishing the family is not a thing that the DSA is predisposed with. Everyone always says that, but they're
that's
not.
because there's clips I've watched with my own eyes where they say that. They had a whole like meeting about it.
I think I can't speak on the exact clips that you've seen, but there are people with wildly different opinions on things of
So
that
you would
nature.
say that's fringe,
Hasan can't respond with substance to anything. Oh my God.
even for them.
I
like,
would
forget
go
about
so far as to say that like not only is it fringe, but it's also not like a real consequential policy driven focus of the Democratic Socialists of America. It's not a focus of the DSA at all.
that. Would you advise them against it?
Abolishing the family?
Yes.
Because it's not even like a legitimate point of contention. It's not even worth discussing. I will say it's usually, I think in my experience, the way that these things work is like people will have sometimes even like academic conversations in these sorts of settings about like what it means to have a family, or like what's the traditional nuclear family, or what its impact has looked like in society or whatever. And then someone will basically film like a piece of that conversation of someone being very sincere, but maybe being almost hysterical, right? And then they'll be like, look, this is so silly. The entire organization is predisposed with this. They're not. Especially when it comes to cultural things. Like there's no policy making about like family enforcement within the DSA whatsoever.
Okay, so walk me through then, because I'm looking at those clips and I am admittedly going, no, this is crazy. And from a Marxist standpoint of wanting to eliminate the family as an economic unit, which they echo that language, it does make me go, there are dots for them to connect. And I see how if they believe in a Marxist worldview that they end up there. You saw that play out in China. Like people really do enact these policies and it ends up being, from where I'm sitting, absolutely
Do you mean like the
devastating.
one-child policy or something?
No, I'm talking like Mao's China. Mao's China was the state is going to take care of you. All that matters is the state. You're not there for mom and dad. You are there for the state. And if you got to turn on mom and dad so we can beat them to death, then you better do it. And they would literally beat them to death.
I don't think the Cultural Revolution was good per se, but I also don't think that it was
Good per se, but I don't think it was as bad as the evil West makes it out to be.
because like the young people abolished the family unit
Quite
and
literally.
decided to beat on their parents because they were counter-revolutionary.
You're not going to get kids to turn in their parents if you don't break that unit. So anyway, if
I don't think that's
if
what
I'm
the DSA
deranged on that,
I
I'm
don't
willing to
think
accept
that's what
that.
the DSA
so,
wants.
so map out for me. My initial question is, hey, a lot of people are turning towards socialism. You're saying that's self-evident, and I'm saying these are the things that I believe about the socialist movement, and you're saying no, you're
the family stuff is
family
stuff is utterly irrelevant. And also, these guys, there are so many different variants of how to implement socialism. That exists under one umbrella, where they're broadly, I would say, anti-capitalist.
What is socialism? I can tell you what socialism isn't. Somebody linked this. Admittedly, I haven't. I heard this talking point about them wanting to abolish the family, but it sounded retarded. I never looked into it. But what is this?
And on that revolutionary horizon, want to perform abortions in a church, but before it's all said and done.
The only real difference between marriage and prostitution is the price and the duration of the contract.
We can fight for family abolition. We can
Jesus.
imagine family abolition because we have seen Black women do it, because we have seen these like indigenous communities do it.
But to me, it is the institution of marriage can only exist alongside the criminalization of sex workers.
Children whose parents are unable to provide either housing, food, or safety are treated as if they have committed a crime. So kids themselves are treated as if they have committed a crime if they're not born into a family that can support them.
In addition to abolition of family policing, you argue for abolition of the family in general, and say that the institution of the family acts as part of the carceral system in the way that it reinforces children as property.
I think the left is constantly surprised at how few people
Where is this from 5 years ago, or why are they all still wearing masks?
are ready for revolt, despite the extremely dire conditions that we are in that keep becoming more and more dire every day.
Women and children are the most harmed by capitalism, but also women and children are the architects of their fate.
So when we talk about family abolition, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about the abolition of that economic unit. For me, that liberatory horizon is to say it is a horizon in which kinship and care are, in which all of our material needs are taken care of by the collective.
Sex work, the criminalization of sex work is like the dark underbelly of the sanctified, reified, and legally enforced institution of exchanging your bodily autonomy and your sexuality for economic security. I don't think one can exist without the other.
Like, that sounds like some crazy radfem stuff, not necessarily some socialist stuff, but I'm sure that like democratic socialists wouldn't push back on any of it. So like it probably originates from the idea that somebody in chat was saying it, like the nuclear family is like a patriarchal institution that necessarily exploits the unpaid labor of the woman, and so this like unit needs to be abolished or whatever. But they're not necessarily against like male, female, marriage, children, things. It's just that economic unit is what they're opposed to.
But even then, there's still people who are social democrats, for example, not even democratic socialists, that play a role in this movement. They just want some kind of regulation over the most insane aspects of endless greed backed capitalism. But things like abolition of the family is not a real point of contention or even remotely relevant. I think they care more about like labor union organizing, implementing certain policies like Medicare
really
for all.
Labor. So let's take them one by one. So labor union organization. What's their end goal with that?
They want workers to have more power to collectively bargain directly at their place of business, and therefore create like a network of pushback against capital owners when they implement certain policies.
Now, the data shows that union organization is far less impactful on somebody's economic gain than globalization. Globalization, where I, as an entrepreneur, can be like, nah, I'm just not going to do this in Michigan. I'm going to go do this in Tokyo or whatever, is the thing that erodes their power. So, are people that are headed towards socialism? Are they like, is that a big bone for them? Where it's like, listen, what we care about are worker wages, and unions are maybe part of it, but the reality is, as long as we're importing cheap labor and we're exporting jobs, workers, blue collar workers for sure, are not going to have negotiating power.
Oh, no, I think this is something that a lot of people understand. There's, plenty of, all labor unions are pretty much trade protectionist. Like, that's part of the reason why even the UAW, despite its anti-Trump position, was looking at the initial tariffs conversations and saying, like, hold on, we're not going to immediately attack Donald Trump for this, because on principle, this is something that is, if done correctly, could be very helpful to the auto manufacturing business, the automobile industry. Of course, given the way that we've designed the automobile industry, especially with like some of the free trade negotiations that we've built with Canada and Mexico that Trump also implemented, even though he came in as an anti-NAFTA force initially, there is no way to there's no way to do trade protectionism that doesn't actually eradicate certain parts of the manufacturing base in this country and still ultimately be harmful to the UAW. But going back to the DSA or labor unions, you're right. Displacing labor is the primary function of capital. They want to displace labor because that is efficient. If you have technological improvements that allow you to, for example, do the work of 10 people now.
They don't want to displace labor. They have an antagonistic relationship with labor, I guess, is true.
With one person, then what I would say should be done is to make that, never fire the 9 other employees, but instead make all 10 of those employees do a tenth of the work that they have to do, like a tenth of the direct labor that they have to do when their output remains the same. To make that, never fire the 9 other employees, but instead make all 10 of those employees do a tenth of the work that they have to do, like a tenth of the direct labor that they have to do.
Then how do you compete with another firm who just hires one employee to do all that work and now is selling the product for half the cost?
Their output remains the same. A boss looks at that situation and goes, oh, that means we can fire 9 workers and make 1 worker do the work of 10. And labor is obviously the most malleable aspect of commodity production, and therefore it's the one that bosses are constantly looking to depress the wages on or to outsource to the global south, where it's a much cheaper alternative. Labor unions play a formative role in ensuring that that transition does not harm the existing domestic manufacturing base of labor to the best of their ability. They either create better exit packages that take away from CEO pay or whatever that will allow these people to transition into other sectors easier, or they retain pensions, or ultimately in places where they do exist, where there is continued output at the domestic front. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, labor unions are responsible for increasing people's wages by 10% in areas where they unionize, and they even have a capacity to increase wages for the non-unionized parts of the same sector in the.
Okay, I'm good on this.